Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Welcome back to the Savvy Dentist podcast, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Jesse Green here at the control panels, and as always, I'm delighted to be having a chat with you guys, being in your earbuds. And today is a real day for a treat. We are joined by someone who I regard as royalty on the speaking circuit. Jim Cathcart has spoken to literally millions of people over a career spanning 40 plus years, and he has shared the stage with some of the greats. You think of the Tony Robbins, the Zig Ziglars, and many others. Well, Jim Cathcart has been there with them all, and he is sharing his wisdom and wit with us today. My observation of Jim is he is an incredibly generous and nice man, as well as incredibly wise. He has authored several books, including the Self-Motivation Handbook and many, many others as well. And we're going to be covering a whole lot of things today in our conversation. We speak about intentionality, we talk about motivation, not just how to motivate yourself, but how to motivate others as well, which is a common thing that we all think about in business. But most importantly with Jim, what I found is as we spoke, the more I listened, the more I learned. And there's so many nuggets of gold that Jim shares in this conversation. So I'm going to really encourage you to make sure you've got a pen and paper handy. And there's a couple of moments, and you'll hear me talk about it throughout the conversation, where I'm going to suggest you pause, rewind, go back and listen to it a few times, because there is some absolute gems that Jim shares with you that I know are going to help you make your practice really, really wonderful. So again, as I said earlier, just have a pen and paper handy, because you're going to want to capture these lessons, and more importantly, you're going to want to take action on them. Now, as always, we've got our Savvy Dentist Facebook group, which is the sister Facebook group to this podcast. And for those people listening to the show, if you're not already a member and you're a dentist, come across and join us. We'd love to see you in there. It is a dentist-only Facebook group where we talk about all things related to the business of dentistry. We've got tools and tips and tricks and tactics and training in there as well. And so please do come across and join us there. I know you'll find it a really useful resource. But most importantly, today is all about a conversation with Jim Cathcart, someone who I regard as an absolute luminary in his field, and I know that you'll get a lot of information and useful practical stuff to take back to your practice. So without any further ado, here's Jim. Jim Cathcart, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and hang with us at the Savvy Dentist podcast. How's things all the way in California today?
Warmer than they are in Australia at this time of year. But we'll trade back in 6 months. How's that?
I think that's a fair deal. I have to tell you at this very present time, Jim, it's about -2 degrees Celsius where I am. I'm not sure what that translates into in Fahrenheit, but it's cold. It's cold. It's okay. It's okay. It's good. It's the cycle of life, isn't it? All seasons come and go. So it's wonderful. Jim, I've been looking forward to having a conversation with you for quite a long time. You're incredibly well known on the speaking circuit. You're incredibly well known for the work that you do around motivation and training of professionals in sales and a whole lot of other things as well. And I really want to obviously dive into that in a moment, but I'm curious because we have had a few conversations off air about your passions and your hobbies beyond work, your music and hiking. And it's a really eclectic mix of things that you do. And I'm very interested in the journey that someone goes through to get from their start in life to the work that you do now. It's not, I'm assuming, a very linear path. So I'm curious to understand what led you to where you are today.
Well, growing up, I had no idea what I wanted to do for a living. My dad was a telephone repairman. Mom was a housewife, took care of me and my little sister and my invalid grandfather who had been disabled by a stroke. Completely disabled, and my grandmother who lived with us for several years. And so I expected a mediocre, ordinary life. I figured I'd live to the statistical average of my gene pool and then die. And I really mean that. I didn't expect anything to go particularly well or particularly bad. I just thought I'd have an ordinary, unremarkable life. And I was an ordinary student, and I was not an athlete. And we didn't know anybody who was particularly successful, so I hadn't been around people like that. And years later, when I got married in 1970, shortly thereafter, I went to work for a government agency as a clerk. I was just an assistant to a man who was a loan specialist for the Urban Renewal Agency. And the loans that he processed was to help people who were poor to refinance their homes. And we would rehabilitate the home, which they had, in most cases, through their neglect, turned into a junk heap. So I was an assistant to a guy who didn't need one. So all day long, I'm sitting there bored to tears, making $525 a month and no idea what I want to do for a living. I've got 2 years of college under my belt, newly married, baby at home. I'm 52 pounds overweight, smoking 2 packs a day. In the next room, the radio was playing. And it was a program like your podcast. It was, except it was shorter. It was a 5-minute standard broadcast radio program by Earl Nightingale, who at the time was called the Dean of Personal Motivation and was on 900 radio stations around the world, Australia and the US primarily. And that day in 1972, he said, if you will spend 1 extra hour every day studying your chosen field, in 5 years or less, you'll be a national expert in that field. Well, Jesse, that's the first time in my life it ever occurred to me that significant achievement was possible for me. I thought, well, wait a minute, an hour a day? I've got 8 hours a day. I'm a government worker. I could do this by Thursday. Well, let's see, an hour a day, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year, give myself vacation, 5 years, that's 1,250 hours. If I studied one subject, any subject, dentistry, earth moving, rocket science, it wouldn't matter what it is, 1 hour a day, every day for 5 consecutive years in one field, of course I'd be a leading authority in that field. So I started thinking, what do I want to do? And I didn't know. And it took me a few weeks to come to the conclusion, the illogical conclusion, I want to do what the guy on the radio is doing. I want to help people grow. Well, I had 2 impediments to that. I'd never given a speech, and I had nothing to say. So where are you going to go with that? So I thought, well, why don't I take him at his word and start spending an hour a day studying the field of human development, which was, you can call it applied behavioral science or practical psychology or motivation, whatever, but studying that field. And so I did. And I became, in a matter of a few weeks, fanatical in the true textbook sense of that word, fanatical about personal development. It's all I wanted to think about, talk about, be around. I converted every spare moment to the study of human development and, learning life skills and communication techniques, leadership, and so forth. My circle of friends changed pretty rapidly because when you become that fanatical, the people that are used to hanging out with you just kind of change their mind. And those that are fanatical like you find you fascinating and want to spend more time with you. My friendship contacts evolved. I didn't lose friends, but I got less time with the old ones. And the new friends were fueling my growth and I theirs. And within a year, I was leading group discussions and seminars that had been designed by the Junior Chamber of Commerce, the USJCs. And then I bought Earl Nightingale's recordings, which cost me a month's salary, which was a big, big, big decision. Then I listened to those recordings all day, every day, whenever I had spare time. I'm still working at the Housing Authority, getting paid nothing for going to these JCs meetings. And in 2 years, I went to 400 JCs meetings after work and on weekends.
Goodness me, that's an enormous amount.
For no pay. 2 years, 400 meetings, and all the way to and from the meetings, I was listening to recordings of Earl Nightingale and others when I could find them. And I read all the classic books, Think and Grow Rich, The Power of Positive Thinking, How to Win Friends and Influence, all the classics. And then I got the chance to be the state chairman for the JCs in charge of leadership training programs. And there were 280 chapters in the state of Arkansas where I lived in the US at that time. 280 chapters kept me busy all the time, working with people to help them lead meetings or going to their meetings and leading them myself, or giving speeches about why these programs were good for your chapter and why you should get involved. And so at the end of the first year, I won an award for being one of the outstanding state chairmen, and out of several hundred people that were involved in the state. Then the second year, I became president of my local chapter. And all of this is volunteer time. All of this is free. I'm not getting paid a cent. I'm just working for $525 a month during the day and doing this at night. But it started changing me. My attitude changed. I became more positive and optimistic. I became less casual about my choices. I was becoming much more intentional who I spent time with, where I spent my time, what I ate, what I did physically, what I thought about mentally and read. I just transformed my life, and the people at work noticed. So I got promoted from being an assistant to a loan specialist to being the assistant to the board of directors. And then they elected me president of the Employees Association for our organization. And I had no idea what that meant. And they thought it was a joke. Whoever didn't show up for the meeting, they would elect them president each year. And so they thought, ha, 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 you're the president. And I took it seriously. And by the end of the year, I'd gotten free parking for all the employees. I had arranged an annual picnic and big celebration for us and got it catered, and done a lot of other things. And I was representing the interests of the employees with the board of directors. And so I did really well, got a couple of raises, and my career was advancing. And then I got a chance to go into the business of selling Earl Nightingale's motivational materials full time. And so I left that job and took a very speculative path, went door to door to businesses selling them motivational materials when motivation wasn't even a word in common usage.
So there's so many threads there, Jim, that I have to just pick on a few of those threads and pull on them, because I suspect there's some really good lessons in there. The first thing I'd like to ask you about is when you were, I suppose, effectively doing all the work with the JCs, and that was volunteer work, and you weren't getting paid, and you still had your government job. So I understand you had your safety net with your government job, which was great. That's putting food on the table for your family. Because one of the things I've observed today, and by the way, I think that is an incredibly wonderful thing to have done, and incredibly wise. I don't see that as such a common trait today, perhaps, and maybe I'm just not observing well enough. But for anyone listening, I think that there's some real gold in that, because I think the opportunity to intern, the opportunity to learn, the opportunity to give your time for free in exchange for knowledge is something that is incredibly powerful, and it's a force multiplier. It's an accelerator.
Absolutely. And coupled with that is the spirit of gratitude. If you're a grateful learner, if you're a willing helper, if it's not about you impressing other people, but rather it's from you getting their impressions on your life, then that gratitude tends to be magnetic.
Yeah. And so I think that's a really interesting thing, because certainly when I was a young dentist and learning about business, a mentor of mine gave me exactly that advice. And so we, along with another friend and I, we went off and learned a whole lot of things from other people. And we used to say that we earned money with our day job so that we could learn outside our day job. And I'm also curious to ask you about the leap of faith. When you left that steady job to go into Earl Nightingale's speculative, because all of us at some point get to a fork. Yeah, all of us get to that point where there's a fork in the road, and we could take the safe path or the joy path, and the joy path is unknown.
And the safe path is not always safe. It's obvious, it's logical, it appears to have no scary things in it. But what it does have is this huge oppressive limitation to your joy and your sense of meaning and purpose in what you're doing. And so you end up investing maybe 40 to 60% of yourself in your career instead of 100% of yourself. And as a result, your career reflects that investment. And it doesn't reward you financially, emotionally, or spiritually. By the way, my initial goal when I was in high school was to be like my uncle, who was one of my heroes, to be a dentist.
Oh, wow.
But I didn't pursue the path. I ended up going a different direction.
Well, I think we're all grateful that you chose the path you did. But I wanted to ask you, because there'll be people listening to this podcast at the moment, Jim, who are faced with a decision of one kind or another. And for some, there's that decision of, do I stick with what I know, the safe path in inverted commas? And I'm just mindful this is an audio program and I'm doing air quotes to Jim over the video.
Okay. I could hear them.
You can hear them, yeah. So the safe path versus the path that is a little less known, but is also one that's, if it comes off, gives joy. How do you prepare yourself for that choice? How do you go through that evaluation process? And then how do you find the courage to choose the path that's really going to light you up?
That's an excellent question and a vitally important question. I think, first off, my advice is, like a tree, grow where you're planted, then branch out. In other words, don't pull up your roots and hope to start growing somewhere else when you depend on your roots to be safe for a while. So branch out from where you are, like I was doing. It was my spare time, my weekends and nights that I was devoting to this, not my daytime. My daytime was still earning my living. And then when I got to a position where I could see that there was going to be profitability in taking that leap of faith, wasn't guaranteed, but I could see that it would work. And that's when I decided I'm going to go for it. And it was not a popular move. I got lots of discouragement. My parents and many of my friends said to me, Jim, dude, keep the real job, meaning keep the known, whether it satisfies you or not. I think the reason I had the courage, and the way someone else can develop the courage to make a choice like that, is recognize that you're not just betting on the current reality, like the economy. The economy is mobile, it's volatile, it changes all the time. So you're betting on moving parts if you're betting on the economy. And if you're betting on a particular industry, do you know for sure that industry is going to be around for a long time? It may morph into something else. Most do. So what are you betting on? You're betting on you and the people with whom you're aligning yourself at first. And I would say the stronger of those bets should be on you, because other people occasionally will betray you and break your heart. They will take all your money and leave you penniless starting over. I've had those experiences, and it broke my heart, and I had to struggle, and I had to go meet with creditors one time and say, guys, I don't have the money, but I'm not going to abandon you. Let's work out a plan so that you feel you can trust me and I can pay you what I owe you. That was helped by the fact that I used to be a bill collector when I was in my 20s, repossessing logging trucks in the mountains of northern Arkansas in the southern part of the USA. So I knew how the creditors thought as well as how the debtors thought. But the courage, where do you get the courage? See, courage is a symptom that you believe in certain fundamental facts. If you know what you believe is so, for example, if you believe there's more good in the world than evil, then you're going to go forward optimistically, figuring that most of the people you meet will not cheat you and will not harm you. That belief is also required just to get through a normal day, certainly in an urban setting. And how do you get optimism if you are programmed, for the most part, as a pessimist? Well, you learn optimism. As a matter of fact, the former president of the American Psychological Association, Martin Seligman, wrote a book by that title, Learned Optimism. It is something that can be learned. That won't change your natural impulse to be negative if you have one, but you will learn a better response to the impulse, and you'll become more effective in choosing the path that's most likely to work out. Now, some people will disappoint you. Okay. But then again, some meals aren't going to taste good. Are you going to give up eating and only eat one type of food for the rest of your life? No. Sometimes it's just not going to be good. If you order the same wine every day for the rest of your dining lifetime, occasionally you're going to get a bottle that should have been sent back because it's spoiled, even if it's the same brand. So just figure, yeah, there's negative out there, but it's not going to kill you most times. This morning I was out on the mountain trails running and hiking with a group of my colleagues and friends. There's a mountain lion that lives in our area. There are 2 or 3 bobcats in the area. There are snakes, and it's a warm time of year here, so it's likely that you would encounter a snake. Well, I've done 10 1,000 miles of mountain trail running over the past 16 years, right here where I live in the Santa Monica Mountains near Los Angeles. And I've never seen a mountain lion, though I'm sure he's seen me. I've seen 2 bobcats. Neither one of them chose to bother me. I've seen 4 snakes, 10,000 miles alone on the trail, or not in a group of people on the trail. The result of it is at 71 years old, I can do 100 push-ups every day, and I do. Haven't missed a day since the year 2016. I run 6 miles of mountain trails 3 days a week. How many 50-year-olds can say that?
How many 30-year-olds can say that?
Well, good point.
And actually, it's a really interesting thing because I had it in my notes because I know that your running group is called the Heartbreak Hiking Fools, and we had a conversation about that off air. And I'm curious to ask you about your passions outside of work, but because we're on the topic of hiking and whatnot now, and I suppose going into that hiking with an optimistic attitude, the learned optimism, if that's someone who's coming from a pessimistic programming background, I don't believe you have to learn optimism in your case. I think you're probably full to the brim of optimism. But what I wanted to ask you is, as you go on your hike, it's not about being cavalier. It's not about being reckless, is it? It's about understanding the risk. It's about knowing that those things are there and choosing to proceed anyway and putting in place, I guess, some sort of risk mitigation plan in the process. Is that essentially what you're saying?
And that, yeah, that's very well said. So we have a group of 60 people, and on a big busy day like today we'll have maybe 30 of those show up for the hike. But we're all hiking at our own personal pace. So we're strung out over the 3-mile stretch going at different speeds. I'm usually pushing, and I'm out in the front with a couple of others. But I'm out on the trail alone for the most of the hike. I assume that if I have a problem, which I have on occasion. One time I fainted on the hike. My blood pressure had just dropped after I'd been running for a while, and then came down a hill, went up another hill, and I got dizzy and I fainted. Well, as soon as I woke up, which was within 30 seconds of fainting, I was surrounded by 3 or 4 of my fellow hikers. I got up, got revived, and went on and finished the hike. Another time I came around a curve and the ground seemed to be mobile. Instead of being solid like I needed it to be, it slipped right out from under me, and my face went like that on the ground, and I broke my cheek and my jaw.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, and my face swelled up a little bit, and I went on and finished the hike. So I did about 7 miles that day, and when I went to coffee, my face had swollen quite a bit, and a friend of mine who's a doctor said, "You really ought to go get an MRI." So I did. And sure enough, there was a crack in both of those bones, jawbone and the cheekbone. The doctor told me it's not severe enough to do surgery or anything like that. So go on about your life. He gave me some pills to take for the immediate thing to avoid infection. And then I went on about my business.
It's part of the thing. So again, just coming back to that, because there's a really interesting theme as well, because you mentioned earlier going back to when you were in debt and you had to make arrangements with your creditors.
That was about 15 years into my speaking career, after I'd already written some best-selling books and flown all over the world giving speeches and seminars.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because whether it's falling over and breaking a jaw or dealing with creditors, the ability to deal with adversity and to understand that things don't always work out as the fairy tale says it's going to. So I wondered if you had any thoughts or advice for the listeners who might need to deal with something that hasn't quite worked out. How do you pick yourself back up, dust yourself off, and get back on and keep going?
Well, first, recognize that along the career path of a dentist, there are colleagues, partners that you might be in a practice with who don't have their act together as well as you. There are those who are way more put together than you are. There are circumstances that will affect your practice in profound ways, not the least of which would be a personal injury that would inhibit your eyesight or your hands. So you have to be careful about the things you choose. Like boxing wouldn't probably be a good choice, right? Some people would do that, mixed martial arts. Yeah, let me add it. It's a macho thing to do. I'm a dentist. Really? Next week you won't be. You may need one, but you won't be one because you're going to break the things that make your career successful. Or you can have two exceptionally good or three or four exceptionally good doctors in a practice together and choose the wrong location or the wrong marketplace and end up with a failing practice. Not because you're not skilled or talented or brilliant, not because you're not great people to deal with or you're not ethical, but because you're in a place where the buyers you need aren't there. Your patients aren't abundant enough to feed that practice. So there are all kinds of things like that to be considered. And also, you've got suppliers. Some of them will be there when you need them, and some of them will let you down occasionally or have a problem of their own, and it'll leave you high and dry when you had promised this person you were going to do their treatment on a particular date, and now you don't have the composites or the tools that were essential for it, and so you've got to postpone. What I've found is telling the truth is almost always the most healing medication one can apply. I have a publisher of one of my books who didn't pay me royalties for like 9 months or even send me a statement. And I called the publisher and I said, "What's up?" And the publisher avoided my call. And I sent an email 3 times and didn't get a response. So I sent an email through a colleague who had direct contact with the publisher. The colleague sent my email copied on to the publisher, and the publisher realized that they'd been caught. And they responded directly to me, "Hey, we're having some difficulty. As soon as we get our accounting feedback, we'll get back to you." Well, during that whole process, that publisher could have called me and said, "Jim, we're strapped and we're having a tough time right now, and I owe you a royalty statement and probably a check, but I wanted you to know what's going on so you wouldn't feel like we were trying to avoid you or deceive you." The truth is the greatest news in the world, even when it's awful, awful, awful bad news, because like Bill Gates said in his book, The Business at the Speed of Thought, bad news must travel fast. Otherwise, you can't do anything about it until it's too late.
Yeah, wonderful. That's fantastic. So speaking of books, you're obviously an author of many books, but I wanted to speak just particularly about one for a moment. It's called the Self-Motivation Handbook. Can you tell us what was the inspiration and impetus for writing that book?
Well, I've always been a specialist in that field, motivation, and I had the book Relationship Selling, which had become an international bestseller, and proud of that, and it's still going strong. Built a whole intellectual base around that, IP, intellectual property. It did the same thing around professional speaking and public speaking, so I've got a body of work there. And I did for 9 years psychological research that resulted in a body of work around my book that I call the ACORN Principle. It's about knowing yourself and understanding what makes you who you are. But what I didn't have was a book on motivation, but I'd written hundreds of articles about it. So the first thing I did was I took all those articles and turned each one into a 1-minute message. What's the absolute essence of this article? How can I boil that down to a 1-minute message? And I recorded 300 and some odd 1-minute messages. And then I put that on a radio program here in the United States. They got advertisers for it, and it was just a little daily thing. And then I had all those transcribed, and I put them together, and I sent it to a publisher, and they said, "If you will treat this a little bit differently, we'll publish the book." And so okay, what am I going to call it? Well, I'll call it the Self-Motivation Handbook because it has, once it was edited, 336 1-minute ideas on how to get yourself to do what needs to be done when you don't feel like it, and how to do the same when other people don't feel like it. How do you motivate them? And the essence of the book is motive, action. A motive without action is simply a dream or a fantasy. Action without a motive is just random behavior. But a motive, when acted upon, is motivation. So motivation is about, like, if you want to motivate your kids, find out what their motives are. No, I'll give them motive. No, you can't give other people motives. You can stimulate their motives, You can discover their motives. You can help clarify their motives, but you can't give them motives. It's them. They are the source, the creator of their motives. So what do they want? Do they want to be famous? Do they want to have fun? Do they want to be accepted by other people? Do they want to be first, fastest, biggest, best, or most? Do they want to be safe? Do they want to be intellectually enlightened? What are their motives? What do they care about? And then stimulate that and show them how doing that relates to completing their homework or whatever, if it's a kid, or if you're talking about your office staff, show them how that relates to treating the patients better, being more proactive in recommending things, catching problems before the mistakes are made, doing a double check on inventory or on follow through or on cleanliness or disinfection or something, all the things that matter to a practice.
So that's a really fascinating point, Jim, because oftentimes, if you talk to, I assume business owners in any endeavor, and dentists are no different, and the business owner will say, if only I could get my staff or my team to do this, this, and this, what's wrong with them? And I think what I'm hearing you say is we're wanting our motives to be placed upon them rather than uncovering their own motives and finding a way to meet their own motives. So for all the business owners listening there, I guess the key message then is to uncover, clarify, and distill the motives of the team that work for them as a first step. Would that be reasonable?
Yes. And I've had people say to me, my people just aren't motivated. Yes, they are. Maybe motivated to check their Facebook more often than they do the work. They may be motivated to avoid responsibility or find leisure time or take a smoke break when they should be working. They've got motives. It's just that the motives are applied poorly. So figure out what matters to them and say, what if what matters to them doesn't relate to my business? Find a way to relate it to your business or find a new employee. It doesn't make sense to keep people around who are not sensing any meaning or satisfaction from their work, because they're only going to give 30% of themselves to the work anyway. And you could be paying the same amount and getting 70% of someone else.
I think that's an incredibly important conversation to have with team, is firstly to uncover the motives. And secondly, as you say, find a way to align what needs to be done to their motives. And if that's not possible, then maybe it's just not a fit. Maybe it's time to kind of, again, the truth is always the best medicine, right? And so maybe there's a kernel of truth in that.
What about those, and this is rhetorical, but what about those professionals who say, look, I'm not a manager, I'm not a motivator, I don't do what you do, Jim. I'm hardly even a business person. I'm a dentist, for heaven's sakes. I'm a doctor. I'm a trained professional. That's my specialty. That's my superpower. That's my gift. I just want to do that. To that person, I would say, fine, go to work in someone else's practice. Lose the grief. Get rid of the overhead. Get rid of the problem areas that are holding you back and have a satisfying career just being a medical specialist. Okay? But for those that say, no, I want to build my own practice, have my own career, create a place for other people to succeed, then I say, okay, you've taken on a different responsibility along a parallel path. And if you don't develop that specialty the way you developed your other specialty, your medical specialty, then it will lag behind and it will inhibit your success as a medical professional and the success of the people who affiliate with you. Not to mention, every patient will be able to tell. Every single patient.
Jim, if I could reach through the screen and give you a high five right now, I really would. Because, ladies and gents, hit pause, go back about 30, 40 seconds and just listen to that over and over on repeat, because I guarantee you that is the essence of success in business. And if you don't want to be the sort of person who runs a business, then fine, go and work in someone else's practice and enjoy that. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's about choosing your path and making sure that your path is right for you. Because sometimes, here's the thing, Jim, sometimes I feel like we get funneled down someone else's path, right?
By expectations of other people, not by our own heart.
Exactly right. So I suspect that there are some people who find themselves in a business because it's, again, using my air quotes, the thing to do. And that's just the natural progression. And whether it's what I want to do, whether it's what lights me up, well, that seems to get pushed aside sometimes because of, as you say, the expectations of our peer group. And it's an interesting thing.
I've got to tell you a quick story. My dentist, my personal dentist, is Dr. Stephen Woodall in Thousand Oaks, California. Years ago, this is more than 10 years ago, I was at my country club, Sherwood Country Club, and Stephen and his wife had just joined. And so there was a new member orientation, and I host a group discussion there called Sherwood Parlor. And this was a kind of like a discussion salon, where like a living room meeting or a parlor meeting where you get people together that are fascinated by some subject and you all talk about it. So I would bring in special guests and the guests would talk for a few minutes, and then I would facilitate a dialogue in the evenings among those that had come to the meeting. And so I was at this new member orientation to tell the new members about that service that we offered at the country club. And Stephen and I met, and he gave me his card. And then I got an email or a note in the mail or something from him, some kind of an outreach. He said, hey, if you're at a point where you could consider another dentist, please give me consideration. And I thought, well, he's an impressive guy. I'll do it. I'll give him a shot. So I went by his office and he said, let me do a thorough checkup. And he did. And he photographed every inch of my mouth and jaw. And then he sat me down in front of a computer screen and showed me what he had photographed. All these fillings that had been put in there when I was 10, 12 years old by my uncle, the dentist, who was in the Navy. And they were put in well, but they were old fillings. And many of them needed replacing. And also I needed a couple of crowns and such. So he said, here's the wasteland that is currently your mouth. He didn't use those words. Here's what you need. And there are levels at which you can address it. You need to do this right away. This can wait, but ought to be done next. And then this would really put you in better shape. Well, I ended up, at the time, I financed it, $10,000 worth of dental work. I booked it with this new dentist, and he's been my dentist ever since. And I'm quite happy with him as my dentist, and he's also now become a social friend.
Isn't that lovely?
So, yeah. And it just started from him having a business card, him sending a follow-up note that said, if you're ever considering a different approach or a new dentist, then please keep me in mind. Had he not done that, I'd never have thought about him as a dentist again and may never have done any business with him.
So this comes back to, I know you've done a lot of work in sales and selling, and it's one of my favorite topics. And I should say that for people listening to the show, I think it's time we get real about the word sales as well, because dentists typically get a bit squeamish with the word sales, but it is what it is. We can call it case presentation or case acceptance, but let's call it what it is. I think that's the truth serum. It's sales. And so I spent my early years learning to sell with network marketing because I read a book by Robert Kiyosaki called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and there are very few books I can say, and there's a handful of books I can say that have changed my life, and that one was one. And it taught me that I needed to learn to sell. So I went into network marketing, and I remember one of my mentors in that space always telling me that the money was in the follow-up.
Indeed.
And
indeed.
I wonder if, you've got a perspective on that?
Oh, yeah. Almost anybody can get themselves to reach out in the first place. Almost nobody takes the time to follow up. I mean, think about it in your own life. How many people who you've spoken with about something where you were willing to buy, they didn't follow up and you ended up buying from somebody else?
So many times.
Yeah. So if you become a master at follow-up, you don't have to be a persuasive genius. You simply have to be professional, respectful, appropriate, and proactive. I don't brush my teeth after a cavity has been identified. I brush my teeth every morning. Why? Because that's what my uncle taught me. That's what Dr. Bruff, when I was 9 years old, taught me. That's what Stephen Woodall tells me. Be proactive. Keep your mouth better so I don't have to remind you. Okay, I will. And when I went in the other day, which was like 4 days ago for a cleaning, the technician said to me, "You're looking good. Don't need to see you for 6 months. Enjoy. Keep up the good work." So instead of worrying about dentures at 71 years old, I'm more concerned about where I'm going to order my next steak.
And that's the kind of problem that we all aspire to, mate. So you spoke about Stephen Woodall and the relationships, and I know you've done a lot of work in relationship selling. I authored a book around patient retention, and I remember giving the manuscript to a friend of mine to read, and his feedback to me was, so Jesse, what you're telling me is this is essentially a relationship book. And I said, it's absolutely a relationship book because we're in a people-to-people business. So again, coming back to your experience with relationship selling and so on, how do you see the relationship? It's rhetorical, I realize that I know you're going to say it's a critically important thing, but how do you create relationships? How do you sustain relationships? How do you do that in a professional sense?
Yeah. First off, I want to make this point boldly clear. Customer loyalty or patient loyalty, patient retention, if you want to call it that. Customer loyalty is something to be given, not something to be sought after. Something to be given to your patients, not something to seek to receive from your patients. If you are continually loyal to them as a medical professional, as a guardian of their health and well-being, then they will be appropriately responsive to that. And the patient retention or customer loyalty you get from their side will increase exponentially. But the only thing you can control is your loyalty to them as a provider. You say, yeah, but they don't spend much with me and they don't follow my advice. Don't abandon them just because they haven't learned to be a great patient yet. Now, if they're an abusive patient, you can fire them because life's too short to deal with jerks, right? But let people misbehave once or twice and just chalk it up to bad timing or something else going on in their world. But if you see a continuing pattern, just say, hey, Jim, you need to make a choice. We either continue this relationship with new behavior on your part, or you continue to abuse my staff and people who have less power than you, and you do it somewhere other than here, right? So that's that. Now let's go to relationship. What is a relationship? I've asked that question of thousands of people live from the stage, and I've never gotten the same answer consistently. So I came up with a definition of my own. A relationship is a direct connection between people in which value is exchanged. In which value is exchanged. Now, you can't have a relationship with a business. You can have relationships with the individuals that comprise it, but not the business itself, because that's just a concept. So relationships are direct connection between people in which value is exchanged. What is value? Value is only able to be determined by the recipient. You can guess at what's value and provide it, and sometimes get it right, but only the recipient can tell you whether it really is what they were hoping for. Okay, so how do you build a business on relationships? Well, you consider relationships as assets, just like a machine would be an asset, or a location would be an asset, or a relationship with a particular supplier is an asset. If you look at each relationship and you figure the least level of that relationship before it turns into a liability is mere transaction. I know you exist, you know I exist, here's the money, give me the thing. Done. Next, right? And that's transaction. Now, a kiosk could have done that. Okay. So the next level, it has a little bit more trust, a little bit more, until finally you get to the point where you are the preferred provider and professional best friend of this person when it comes to medicine. They seek your advice even when they have an appendectomy need, right? So that's the higher level of the relationship. Difference in the two is trust and the quantity of and quality of value that you're giving to them. You cannot control what they're giving to you except by setting your prices appropriately, but you can determine what you're giving to them. And that's the thing to control.
I think that is so important. And again, I really like the fact that the value exchange is in the eyes of the receiver. And I really, really resonate with that. And I think for anyone listening who's been listening to this show a few times now, you'll know that this is something we circle back around a few times. And what I love about what you've expressed there, Jim, is it's just so elegant. It's so simple. Simple's not always easy, of course. We understand that simple's not easy, but if you'll follow that simple principle, I think it's going to hold people in such good stead over a very long period of time.
Absolutely. If I were coming into a practice that was in disarray and the dentist said to me, Jim, this is a mess, help us. The first thing I would do is I would look at the place, and then I would look at the people, and I'd talk to the people, and I'd find out if there were any obvious problems there. Assuming there were not, the next thing I would look at is the list of patients, and then I would talk with the staff and the dentist about each of the patients as we went down the list. And then I would say, okay, how can we give more value to this patient without necessarily costing ourselves a cent? How can we make him or her feel happier that they are doing business with us? Because it's not what you know that counts. It's not who you know that counts. It's not who knows you that counts. It's not even who they know that counts. What counts the most is who is glad that you're their dentist.
That is really, really powerful. So again, guys listening, please pause, hit rewind, go back and just listen to that again, because you're going to get a lot of value just from following that particular exchange there. Jim, I do want to shift gear just for a second, because I know that you mentioned the word intentionality a moment ago, and intentionality is a word that I really resonate with. And I wanted to get your thoughts on how you define it, how you use it, and I guess the importance you see that the concept of intentionality has in someone's life, and in particular their business life. Where do you see intentionality fitting into that?
I see it as a profound asset, and that it should be cultivated intentionally and with discipline. Intentionality means I meant to do that way, right? One time, Barbara Streisand was at a venue and rehearsing and doing all the staging to prepare for her performance. And if you remember her as a performer, she was exceptionally good. I mean, really, really, really superior as a singer and a performer. And I remember the person working at the venue was complaining that she was such a perfectionist. And I said, are you out of your mind? That's not something to criticize. That's something to admire. She's a perfectionist because she wants to be intentional about where the lighting is and where she stands, where the sound is best heard, and how she sings at a particular point. Which mix of instruments is playing in relation to her voice at this point and that point and that point in the song. She wants to be intentional, like John Denver used to go to a venue early and meet with the people in the parking lot who were going to be helping park cars and selling tickets to the parking lot. And he met with those people face to face and told them how important they were in helping set the mood for the audience that would be listening to his performance later. Garth Brooks goes up into the stands, into the huge arenas where he's performing, and sits in the most remote seats and thinks about, how can I, from the stage, make this person feel that I'm singing directly to him or her? The more, if you look at any person's life, especially your own, and you're able to assess the percentage of intentionality in it, you will find that the higher percentage of your life, your day-to-day experiences, that is intentional, that you did it that way because you meant to, the higher your success level will be correspondingly. So look at your practice. Where your practice is, can you be more intentional about guiding people to good parking? Can you be more intentional about causing the front entrance to be more pleasing? Can you be more intentional about the initial moment when someone new comes into your office, never been there before, what they see, what they smell, what they hear, and how they feel? Can you be more intentional about the first words you say to a person when you're presenting them with an unexpectedly large bill? Actual verbal script to start that conversation to give them a little pillow to fall against, instead of blunt in your face, this is going to cost you your home. So just find every single thing you can do. Well, when you're practicing dentistry, the way you hold your fingers is intentional. Every single one. The tilt of your wrist is intentional. The position from which you're looking and where the light is above the person is intentional. Take that same element, same principle, and apply it to every part of your life you can think about.
Intentionality, I think, for me, Jim, I think intentionality is the most potent focusing exercise that someone can do, and it's the whole Tony Robbins saying, where focus goes, energy flows. And so I think if you can be intentional with what it is you're trying to create, that creates that level of focus, it creates energy, it creates momentum, and of course you get what you intend, right? And if you don't intend anything, you don't get anything in particular.
And if you're not intentional, then you get what somebody else was intentional about, or what chaos brings about as a result of no intentionality expressed.
Yeah, Jimmy, you've been incredibly generous with your time today, and I'm very conscious of that. And the value exchange has definitely been profound. So firstly, thank you. I really am very grateful to you for taking the time. Before we wrap up, though, I do want to ask you, so I know you've got a lot of resources on your website, and I've trawled through your website with a fine-tooth comb, and there's a lot of goodies there. So firstly, for anyone listening, I'd encourage you to head across to cathcart.com and check out the resources.
By the way, that was intentional. I chose the last name because I realized that to a large extent, I am the product. I'm the golden goose, and I happen to sell eggs. So it's not just about the golden eggs, it's about the goose. And if the goose is the brand and I'm the goose, then Cathcart is the better website name than, say, motivationexpert.com, which I happen to own also. It's cathcart.com that draws the crowds.
Yeah. So there is a huge array of resources there. For people listening to this particular show, is there any particular resource on your website that you direct people to just as a starting point to pick up on some of the threads of today?
Yeah, there's two things. The first one would be the book Relationship Selling, or any of the recordings or the podcasts or the other things, and most of which is free on my website. 730 pages of free. Let that sink in. 730 pages of free resources on my website. So there's videos to watch, the recordings, the blog posts, there are all these things. Relationship Selling, that would be the first. And then the second would be the Self-Motivation Handbook, because that will apply to your home, your family, your staff, yourself, your colleagues.
Cool. So ladies and gents, I'd really encourage you to take Jim up on some of those suggestions. There's some wonderful resources, and I'd really encourage you to have a good look through them like I have. There's treasure trove of goodies. Before we wrap up though, Jim, I do have one last thing I wanted to ask you, and that's about music. We did talk a bit about music before we started our conversation, and behind you on your wall is a lovely Taylor guitar. I wanted to ask you what music has meant to you and what it's taught you in your life as it relates to, business and professionalism and all those sorts of things. Where is music fitted into your life?
When I was in my early 20s, I started playing the guitar and singing, and I played in some beer joints and nightclubs and, just casual playing for friends at parties. And then I got married and I did serious things, and I played only for amusement from time to time. Well, back in 2006, a friend of mine said, "Hey, bring your guitar. We're going to have a hot August night," which is a concert that Neil Diamond did once, party. And we're going to play Neil Diamond on recording, and then we're going to all sit around with our guitars and jam. So I went over there, and I in the meantime, practiced some Neil Diamond songs, got a songbook and all. We had a good time. Well, then I decided to host my own guitar night, and more people came over, and we generated quite a following. So I went to my country club, and I said, if I held a guitar night at the country club, would you invite all the members, the 600 and some odd members? And they said yes. So they put it together, catered it, staged it, and all that. And I showed up with some friends, and we performed, and about 60 people enrolled to come to this thing. And then we were on a roll. And I ended up accepting an offer from one of the audience members to become a regular once-a-month performer at a local nightclub. And my wife would sing with me, and a friend of mine would show up and play guitar. And we ended up doing like 48 performances over the next couple of years. And that led to a total of 8 years of performing every month professionally. Now, the thing I've learned about music, not only is it joyful, but it's also humbling because it pays like 1/100th of what I get paid when I go out as a speaker or trainer or consultant. But it's my joy, it's my fun, it's my playtime. I constantly play the songs I haven't played lately so that I keep my memory sharp, remembering the chords, the notes, and the lyrics. I keep my performance chops sharp by regularly putting myself in positions where I'm expected to perform professionally. And so I know I can't just slide through it and do a casual job. And I know over 400 songs like that I could just do right now. And I know all the lyrics, I know all the chords and notes. I can play it at the right beat, and I get it right. So people are amazed at that. Well, I'm not, because I did all the hard work that made it amazing to see. But I didn't learn all those songs at once. I learned them 1, 2, 3 at a time.
Yeah, well, it's that. I guess it's that repetition and practice, and the intentionality behind it. Coming back to that concept again.
Well, today after the hike, I came home, showered. After my hands were no longer moist from the shower, I played guitar and sang for an hour.
Wonderful. Jim, you've been, as I said, incredibly generous with your time. I have one last question, if I could impose upon you for one thing. And it's a question about Earl Nightingale. And if there was one lesson, and I realized to simplify this to one thing is probably fraught, but if there was one thing you learnt from Earl Nightingale, what was the most important thing that Earl Nightingale taught you? Because he is, I think, one of the most influential people that's ever been on this planet.
True, yeah. And he knew Napoleon Hill, and he knew Dale Carnegie, and he knew Norman Vincent Peale and those kind of people, many of whom I got to know also. Like Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins. I've spent time with both of them. Zig was a good friend. I know Tony more arm's length kind of relationship. But the main thing I got from him is if you want something, you should become an eligible receiver of it. So in other words, ask yourself every day what I talk about in my book, The Acorn Principle. How would the person I intend to become do the things I'm about to do? How would the professional I would like to be manage his or her practice? How would the medical professional that I would like to be treat his or her patients, study this or that discipline, explore this or that technique to master that movement or that craft or that technology? How would that person manage his or her staff? How would that person deal with this ethical dilemma that I'm trying to solve? How would that person take care of his or her personal health and fitness so that they show up on the job looking healthy, not just recommending good health?
Profound. Wonderful. And as always, on point. Jim, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and hang with us. You are a scholar and a gentleman. And if ever the phrase gentleman Jim applied to anyone, it applies to you, sir.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate it.
I'm really, really chuffed to have had you on our show. So from all of us here, a big thank you.
My pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in Australia sometime soon.
I hope so, mate.
So I hope you had your pen and paper handy there, because as you would have heard, Jim shared some absolute pearls of wisdom, and I know that if you take action on those pearls of wisdom, it's going to have a tremendously positive impact on your practice. So if you haven't had a pen and paper handy, please go back, re-listen to that episode and have a pen and paper handy for the second time round. As always, do come and join us at the Savvy Dentist Facebook group. It's a resource for dentists where we discuss all things related to the business of dentistry. Tools, tips, tricks, training, and so on are all there. And it's a really useful resource, and I hope you'll come and find us and join us. All you need to do is head across to drjessegreen.com/Facebook and hang out with us, and we'd love to see you on the inside there. But until next week, have a great week, and we'll see you on the flip side. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.